All right, guys, welcome to episode 63 of Mark Anthony's Music Picks. Today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite progressive house labels of all time, Yoshitoshi Recordings. Yoshitoshi was founded by Deep Dish in 1994, and some of the newer subscribers to my channel might not remember Deep Dish as Deep Dish, but they might know them more as Ali and Sharam. Ali became Dubfire and Sharam is still Sharam, but they've gone on and done their own solo careers. But before they went and made the kind of music that they make now, they were basically the kingpins of the progressive house scene in the late 90s and early 2000s. And Yoshitoshi was one of the manifestations of that. I guess Yoshitoshi also had straight up house tracks on it, and I'm going to review some of those for you as well. But Yoshitoshi also spun off an offshoot label called Shinichi, which are these records over my shoulder here, and I'm going to review some of those in a future episode. But for today, I'm going to focus on Yoshitoshi and go through their massive catalog because, like I said, it spans from about 1994 to 2015 and 2016. The last vinyls that they did, as far as I know, were basically some rehashes of popular old tracks that had modern remixes, and those came out in 2015 and 2016. And around then, there may have been some digital-only releases that I missed, but for the most part, I'm just going to focus on the vinyl here. First track I want to review for you today is Chia Pet. This is a classic from 1997, and it's a huge track. I mean, as far as like hitting a big room hard, this is a track that would really do some damage here. The track here is called Tock, and it's got two versions of it. There's the Apocalypse version and the War of the Worlds version, or something along those lines. Basically, you're getting two different versions, one with a helicopter flying in the background and one without, kind of like trying to convey this apocalyptic darkness. The bass line in this track, I think, is really what the hook is, and it reminds me of the bass lines that you'll hear if you listen to some of Danny Teneglia's darker tracks, specifically Read My Lips and Elements. If you listen to those two tracks and then listen to the bass line in this, I think the bass element that he used, it kind of has this deep kind of dirty dig to it. I don't know how else to describe it. It's really like a signature of this era, and I think it's really what sets this track off. But man, does this hit hard and go dark. I also wanted to say something about the producer Chia Pet. Chia Pet is one of John Ciafone's aliases, right? He has many aliases, and John Ciafone was one of the members of Mood to Swing. So if you remember the OG house crew, Mood to Swing, that was releasing deep house and house in the early to mid 90s, that's John Ciafone paired up with somebody named, I think his name is Lem Springsteen. So those two made like what were considered to be very classic and long-standing house tracks in the mid-90s, and John Ciafone then at some point went on to do his own solo career, and he's also had a ton of aliases outside of that. So check out John's catalog. He's got a lot of classic tracks to listen to. The next record I want to highlight for you out of the the Yoshitoshi catalog is this one here. This is by Louis Vega and Jay Sinister, and the track's called Diamond Life. This is a huge vocal that was introduced to me by my DJ friend Mike Alba. He loves to play this at day parties, and I understand why. I actually played this at a party that we call Deep Brunch in Philadelphia, where it's like a Sunday day party that starts around 11 a.m. and people come in and eat and then, dance and then drink later in the day. But I played this track and I got a great response from the crowd. version that you want out of this, in my opinion, is the deep dish numb mix. Really just nice arrangement, killer bass, and highlights what is one of the best house vocals of all time, in my opinion. It's just so fun to sing along to, and I just can't get enough of it. My next choice from the Yoshitoshi catalog is this one. It's, I guess, a little bit obscure, and maybe one that you would look past because it's by an artist that, you know, for the most part, he only released one record. BC is the artist on this, and the track is called Switch It. And BC is Bennett Cornelius, and all that I can find about this guy is that he was the Jamaican DJ. And he had help on the production from this from Deep Dish. If you look at the credits, there's Deep Dish as executive producers, and Bennett Cornelius, I guess, was also in the studio helping out there. And the reason that I like this track so much is because I used to be a big Timbaland fan. Remember Timbaland and Magoo from back in the late 90s and early 2000s? I had all their CDs. So as soon as I sampled this, I heard the Timbaland sample. I recognized his voice saying "Switch It." And only recently did I realize that the sample from this comes from Bubba Sparxxx. And Bubba Sparxxx was, if you don't remember, was a Southern rapper, I guess, in the early 2000s that paired up with Missy and Timbaland to do an album. And he had a track called Ugly, which I didn't really like that song at all. But it does, at the end of the track, have one of those signature Timbaland beat switches where he you know, like literally out of nowhere does a beat switch. And he cuts over to Missy, and Missy's riding on a tractor in the music video. It's kind of ridiculous. But anyways, when he says "switch it one time," that is coming from the Bubba Sparxxx track. That's where this originated from. As far as this version goes, there's nothing hip-hoppy about this. This is dark tribal, really nasty progressive, and a signature sound that represents Yoshitoshi. Switch it one time, 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 time. Next record is this one here. This is Miguel Migs. If you guys remember Miguel Migs, he was a San Francisco West Coast producer that was known for deep house and house. And here he went a little bit harder, and I think that's why this track made the cut for Yoshitoshi. Miguel Migs is generally a softer, boutique-y type of producer in my experience of listening to his music. But here he's got some elements that are like a little bit hard and more banging. I would still say this is a house track, but it sounds great. I actually played this in a set recently, and it has aged well. It hits hard. It's fun to mix. It's just got all kinds of jazzy, uplifting elements in it. I would say that this is also a bit of a daytime track, just like the Diamond Life, but has just a little bit of a hard edge to it that makes it appropriate for maybe just as the sun's going down. The version that I like on here is the Dub Pusher Selecta mix. That's just the version for me. There's nothing wrong with the Pulse mix on the B side, but the Dub Pusher is the version for me. Next record I'm going to review is one that I found at 611 Records down in Philadelphia. 611 used to be the social hub and the music hub for the Philadelphia scene in the early 2000s and probably in the late 90s too, but I wasn't buying records back then. I kind of caught it at the tail end right before it closed, and I think it was kind of in a decline at that point. But I did make some great scores down at 611 Records, and this is one of them. This is the limited edition Yoshi Pack. It's a triple pack with all kinds of remixes from Skylark and Shmuel Flash and Low End Specialists and Holmes Yves, I guess is the way you say his name. All kinds of classic Yoshitoshi on here. Nothing on here is bad, but the one track that really stands out is the 6400 Crew. The 6400 Crew Dub Me Something Fresh remix is just so awesome. I have also played this in a lot of my tribal house sets back in the day because it was easy to mix, it was punchy, and it has this metallic kind of like banging sound that just makes it sound like you're in a big abandoned warehouse and something is about to go off. So because of that one sound that's in here, I have just always kind of gravitated towards this track and loved it. I do remember when I originally bought this, it was funny, when I was at 611, I would always get to 611 right when they said they opened, which was like 11 a.m. And that was generally a mistake because the guys that were working were coming in there on Saturday mornings, and like 90% of the time they were really hungover or like sleep deprived. So it was always this like shit show of you would sit outside and wait, and maybe they would get there a half hour or 45 minutes late. So I come in there all bright-eyed and, well rested, and, the guy at the register was barely functioning. And I remember I was bugging him to make me recommendations because, you're walking into this record store. I was new to the whole scene and I didn't know what was good. So I was just telling him or asking him, do you have anything that's good? And I think he just wanted to get me away from the register, and he says, yeah, Yoshi Pack over there is pretty good. And like I said, I think he just wanted to kind of like shoo me away. So I went over and I sampled all the way through this, and eventually I got to the 6400 Crew remix, and just like I said, just latched onto it. So I'm never getting rid of this one. And finally, the most obvious pick out of probably the entire Yoshitoshi catalog, if I'm being honest, is this one here. This is PQM You Are Sleeping. And Luke Chabel did his super classic remix on this. Probably, I would say that the Luke Chabel remix on this is probably in the top 10 progressive house tunes of all time. Like, if you took a global survey and you allowed people to vote on it, I would think that this would be in the top 10 of all progressive house ever, just because of the way it all came together. So The original has a really creepy vocal in it, which I read back in the day came from like an open mic night sort of thing where it was like a fictitious poem that somebody did a reading for. And that reading was later reread for the vocal for this track, as far as I understand it. So you get this story about a desperate, lonely man that basically tries to rescue a sex worker from herself or save her from her lifestyle. And in the process of it, he basically degrades his own life and ends up destroying himself. And, you know, he has no success saving the girl, and he goes down in flames in the process. So it's just kind of like this dark, tragic story to listen to, this very upsetting and disturbing monologue. And on top of that, you know, you've got these spooky minor key Luke Chabal melody where he comes in and just puts his best haunted touch ever on a track. And the whole thing just comes together in this 9-minute journey of progressive house madness.
You pick up this working girl, hooked on smack, hustles and scores. That's all I do, she says. She says $10 per head, 15 for half and half. She says 3 hits a day, 35 per. You say that's 7 trips a day at least. But she says sometimes I get lucky. Once this guy gives me $1.5 billion just to eat me. Only time I ever paid. Only time I ever paid.
Part of the reason that this record got so crazy is because James Holden featured it on his Balance 06 CD, which for old school progressive house fans was one of the biggest progressive house release compilations of all time. I mean, people still worship that to this day. And that got a lot of eyes onto this. It stands on its own merit as well because of just how well it's produced and just how awesome, like I said, it all came together. The funny story about this vinyl for me is that I originally bought this on Music Stack. If you guys remember musicstack.com, I don't know if it's still around. It was one of those websites that was competing with eBay and gem.com back in the day for vinyl sales. So even back in the day, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, this was an expensive record and, you know, probably $25, $30 even back in the day. So I remember this guy in Florida listed it on Music Stack, and in the notes of his comments, he said 2x12, excellent condition, etc., etc. But he listed the price at $3. So I couldn't believe it, and as quickly as I could, I clicked checkout, and I went through the checkout process, and I bought it. When it came in the mail, it was only a single vinyl, and the vinyl that had the vocal pass on it, like the famous version, was missing from the pack. So in the notes it said it was a 2x12, and when I got it, it was a 1x12. And I started freaking out because I wanted the vocal pass. And when I went to Discogs and I looked at the notes, I found that there was a mispress. So the labels on the vinyl were swapped. So what was really the dub vinyl was the vocal and vice versa. So I sent the guy a message letting him know that he accidentally sent me the wrong version of the vinyl and that it was missing the other the vocal mix, but I never heard back from him, and I always wondered if he purposely withheld the what he thought was the vocal version and then kind of screwed himself in the process and got stuck with the dub version. So I guess I'll never find out, but I'm glad it worked out for me that I ended up with the wrong version that was the right version. So that's all I have for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Stay tuned. In the next month or two, I'm going to hit up the Shinichi catalog. And to Deep Dish, Ali and Sharam, thank you so much for the Yoshitoshi catalog. It's deep. There's still a lot of mysteries in there that I need to uncover. For my listeners and subscribers, thank you and have a great week. Take care.